Shalom. Like to give all honor, glory, and praises to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahushai, Ba'ashem Wakakadash, and I give double honors to our apostles and elders, great millstone. Salutations to our sincere Akim, pushing his word out across the four corners of the world. Just a quick news update concerning biblical prophecies. And I want to get Ecclesiastes 3:1. It says, "To everything there's a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven." Verse 2, "A time to be born, and a time to die, a time to plant, and a time to pluck up that which is planted." So this place America, known as Babylon the Great, according to the Holy Bible, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai set up this place, America, that bitter captivity for the biblical Israelites. And now we are in the times within these last days, pursuant to the book of 2nd Ezra, the 9th chapter, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai is about to visit the world which he made. And that's why he's about to start plaguing this place America. Which takes me to this article from naturalnews.com, and it says, "Important indicator shows that the U.S. is headed for its worst real estate crash in country's history." And this was published on February 22nd, 2022. And it says, "To be sure, this isn't what you would call bona fide financial advice. We don't give that here. But it is a warning if you are a property owner and you have been thinking about selling. Now might be the perfect time to do that while you still can." According to the Federalist, a key indicator shows that America could be headed for its worst real estate crash in the country's history, after a shockingly large price bubble appears to have formed. Although it's impossible to predict economic crashes with certainty, a key economic indicator suggests the U.S. housing market is on the verge of an unprecedented crash, one that could end up being the biggest in America's history. The piece by Justin Hackins begins. He went on to note that following the last major real estate plunge in 2008, the Democrat-led Congress, the Federal Reserve, and administrations of outgoing President George W. Bush and incoming President Barack Obama engaged in an unprecedented effort to flood the financial system with new dollars and, to a lower extent, the economy generally. The strategy that followed, quantitative easing, along with stimulus checks, government welfare programs, and government takeovers, was that the Fed, working with Congress and the White House, moved to prop up the U.S. economy and keep it from tanking completely, which, if that had happened, would have taken the global economy down as well. Mass poverty would have ensued on a scale much worse than the Great Depression. And it says right here, Haskin notes further, one of the primary tools the Fed used to accomplish its goals was to keep interest rates at near zero for years on end. From 1980 to 2000, the Fed's federal funds rate, the primary driver of interest rates economy-wide, rarely dropped below 4%, and it was coming from interest rates to be 5% or higher. However, from 2009 through 2016, interest rates were consistently much lower than 1%. Beginning in 2017, the first year of the Donald Trump presidency, the Fed began to more aggressively raise rates, but it only briefly topped 2% in 2018 and 2019 before the Fed once again slashed rates to near zero as part of its plan to address the effects of the C-19 lockdowns. Not so obvious to most people, when interest rates are low over long periods of time, it's far easier for governments to borrow and spend much more money than they take in. Also, banks and financial institutions are more prone to lend money for high-end, costly items. And right here it says, "That said, the real estate market is highly sensitive to interest rate increases. A home is nearly always the most expensive purchase Americans make in their lifetimes, and the vast majority of borrowers must take on large mortgages in order to complete sales. When rates are low, people can take on more debt because monthly payments are less, and as such, sellers tend to increase their prices. This is one of the reasons the real estate market crashed so hard in 2008. Following the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks, the Fed kept interest rates low, encouraging people to take on higher than usual levels of debt, especially in the real estate market," Haskins added. "That's where we're headed now," notes Haskin. "If we see a similar pattern emerge for the bubble that has been developing since roughly 2012, then we could see housing prices drop by 30 to 40% over a 2-year period," he writes. "We can avoid this, but only if the Fed continues to keep interest rates low. That would be a problem. However, because of rising inflation in the biting economy, we could even see the dollar collapse." Regardless of what the Fed does in the short term, it's clear that America's disastrous monetary policy, chickens are coming home to roost. Prepare accordingly, Haskin warns. And if you are spiritually in tune, you can see how Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is utilizing his left hand, referring to the tabernacle of Edom, to further the stage on this global transformation, aka this new world order, and how they designed this so-called pandemic, which took a huge effect upon the inhabitants of America by the way of them losing their homes, their jobs, a lot of their businesses failed, and they lost a lot of their so-called freedoms. And this is that same left hand that had dealings with the so-called 9/11 attacks, the 2008 housing market crisis, many other false flags and staged events, and now with this future real estate crisis. And people might ask, like, why is this happening or taking place? Because if you notice throughout this article, this housing market crisis is taking a huge effect upon the so-called middle-class Americans. And that pursues two biblical prophecies, according to the book of Joel, the 5th chapter, how the tabernacle of Edom, who are the workers of iniquity, how they trying to forge in this enterprise. And that's going into fulfilling this NWO, phasing this world into a digital market, a cashless society. And notice throughout this article also, the guy by the name of Haskins, he's considered as an economist, and he stated how we could see the dollar collapse, which pursues two biblical prophecies in Revelation, the 13th chapter. It stated that he calls it all, both small and great, rich and poor. And notice it didn't say anything about the middle class, because this is all systematically designed to wipe out the middle class. And whereas you're only going to have the rich and the poor. So by these afflictions or plagues that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is bringing upon this place, what is that taking into regard upon these Americans? As it says in the book of Ezekiel, the 2nd chapter, it was a roll written within and without, referring to the Holy Bible, lamentations, mourning, and woe. So these people are going to be in deep sorrows and cries, anguishes, hardships, burdens, and the list goes on. And that leads me to the book of Ecclesiastes 12:3. In the day when the keepers of the house shall tremble, and the strong men shall bow themselves, and the grinders cease because they are few, and those that look out of the windows be darkened. And that goes into how these different Americans had long cherished goals and dreams about like buying a home, because that's considered as the American dream. And now with these draconian measures being put in place, and all these different American so-called goals, dreams, aspirations, it's no longer within reach. So those that look out of the windows be darkened. All your different aspirations, your objectives, your high expectations for this place, for this so-called American dream, for things to get back normal, is becoming diminished, dark, and gloomy. And that's truly beautiful, because Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua, they are setting the tone for these Americans to be more serious. It's because majority of these Americans, they are consumed in folly, in comfort zone, conveniency, and the list goes on. So now by putting these hardships and straits upon this place, these Americans are losing their vision on accomplishing this so-called American dream. And that leads me to the book of Ezekiel 38:11. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. And that's referring to America, because no other country or nation has ever enacted war upon the shores of America. So by that alone, that makes these Americans be more consumed into more folly, all about comfort and being plugged into conveniency. So what that leaves them? Vulnerable. And these different burdens and straits is going to catch a lot of these Americans off guard. And thou shalt say, I will go up to the land of unwalled villages. I will go to them that are at rest. So majority of these Americans are totally in that comfort zone. They have no care in the world. That dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates. And that backs up the scripture in the book of Isaiah, the 60th chapter, how gross darkness the people. Because majority of these modern Babylonians are totally asleep. They have that spiritual veil upon their eyes. So they're not observing the times that we are in, and not knowing that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is about to bring serious judgments upon this place. And I came across another article concerning this housing market crisis, and that was going into how this market is becoming more difficult for home buyers to navigate the housing market compared to a year ago, and how first-time home buyers are now competing with investors and current homeowners who have built enough equity over the past years. And that's going to make it even more harder for these first-time buyers to purchase a home because of rising property prices, higher interest rates. And that's the so-called American dream, by purchasing a big house with the white picket fence, having your kids play all throughout the big yard, So this so-called American dream is nothing but an illusion, which is nothing but a misleading image. What Esau Edom painted out to the inhabitants of America, especially 2/3 of our people that really have hope within this society, which means that they fell for Esau's lies and they got drunken off that Babylonian juice. And that leads me to the book of Isaiah 19:1. It says the burden of Egypt, and spiritual Egypt is referring to America. Behold, the Lord rideth upon a swift cloud and should come into Egypt, and the idols of Egypt should be moved at his presence, and the heart of Egypt should melt in the midst of it. So notice right here stated the burden of Egypt, going into the hardships, the overload, anxiety, and pressure that Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is sending upon this place. And that's by the way of him visiting the world by sending all these plagues upon America. And these people, and really we as well, we haven't seen nothing yet. But through the Spirit, we know how things are going to take off and really get bad here in America. And how majority of these people are not measuring the times diligently in itself. So it's going to take a lot of people off guard. And that's one of the worst type of hardships or experiences to go through, by something hitting you off guard. You're not expecting it. And that's what this so-called pandemic, which turned around a lot of things here in America, like jobs, homes, businesses people have lost. You have the food inflation crisis going on concerning this global supply chain crisis ordeal. And now with this housing market crisis, which is going to cause a housing collapse. And just think about how a lot of these Americans, including a lot of our people as well, they work hard to get in those so-called permanent positions that they are in. They had to sacrifice a lot to get where them and their families are now. So by them just losing everything, these people really going to lose it out here in the streets. It's going to be total chaos and anarchy in the streets of America. And that's when Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is going to lift off that spiritual veil upon the inhabitants of America's eyes. And they're really going to see who planned all this behind closed doors. Which leads me to the book of 2nd Ezra, the 15th chapter and the 16th verse. For there should be sedition among men, meaning incitement of resistance or insurrection against lawful authority. And we are definitely in those times now. So it says, for there should be sedition among men in invading one another. They should not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions should stand in their power. So these different American citizens who really believe in that false image or that perception of the so-called American dream, they're going to be going at the heads of their local authorities. Like these different senators, governors, mayors. Again, Yahweh Ba'Shem Yahushua is going to lift that spiritual veil upon their eyes, and they're going to find out that these global bankers was that hidden hand for the downfall or the collapse of this society. And that's why you had President George H.W. Bush. He stated in December 1992 in an interview, if the American people had ever known the truth about what they had done to this nation, then they would be chased down in the streets and lynched. So we as the hopeful elect who are spiritually tuned in, we know by biblical prophecy that they're going to be hiding themselves via underground bunkers. So who would be next in line for these American citizens to put their hands on? These local authorities. Which further proves biblical prophecies right here. They should not regard their kings nor princes, and the course of their actions should stand in their power. So in conclusion, the plot thickens. We are at the peak of biblical prophecies coming to pass. So this housing market crisis, which is going to lead to a financial collapse, and where they're going to transition this society into a digital world, hence cashless society. So I brought this out. You all was edified. You all stay strong. Keep pushing forward. Shalom.